future of work. So I think I just want to lay that out. It's like the first thing we need to talk about. The apprenticeship model can be retooled to teach anything. Marcy has an apprenticeship school. She'll tell you all about it. We can retool apprenticeship. It is the tool. Like apprenticeship is the way people learn, right? The question is, our apprenticeship model is completely self-funded, self-contained, and it is a self-fulfilling system. It's not a public thing, but it could be for other people. So I want to lay that out there because what we are and what we do and how we build power is very simple. We have one way to build power. We stand together and we speak with one voice. The question is, how do we do it? How do we make the rules fit? Because right now what they do is they make our box smaller and smaller and smaller because it's not in their interest for us to have a collective voice. So that's kind of like the prelude I would lead this up to, because when we're limited, we're only limited by our imaginations and we're limited by the people who are trying to keep us small. But there's only one way to do all the things that the lead up said, and that's with collective voice. So that's what we're all about, and we want to change the world so that the collective voice and the collective voice is available to every worker, even if they don't work with other people. It's still a matter of having a voice on the job and being able to say, this is unsafe. I deserve a raise. I think I should have some health care. These are basic things, but I just wanted to kind of lay that out first and foremost. So at the risk of being like every hammer, that whole adage I did last time, we look for nails because we're hammers, but that doesn't mean that we need to get a couple, chisels and a mallet, and we need to just other tools in our toolbox.
Thanks for that, Joelle. That was a great framing, and I'm excited to ask you a couple of questions once we get going a little bit. And for folks too, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as you're thinking about them. But I think we're also going to have great space for interactive conversation here in a little bit. But with that wonderful framing and really thinking about tools, I would love, Marcy, if you could share a little bit about IBEW next.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me this afternoon. My name is Marcy Obremski. I'm the business manager of the IBEW, and IBEW stands for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. We are a labor organization here in Alaska and nationwide. We are affiliated with Joelle's agency, the AFL-CIO. We represent over 4,200 workers in the state of Alaska, primarily in the electrical construction, electrical utility realm and communications. But we also we have public sector workers, we have a bus barn, we represent workers at a hospital. We have a very diverse membership that we work to represent. Statewide, we have over 70 collective bargaining agreements we administer and negotiate. There are new groups reaching out on a regular basis to, as Joelle said, express that collective voice. We have the tools and resources right here in the state of Alaska. We have here in Anchorage is where our main office is. We have an office in Fairbanks, Ketchikan, and Juneau as well. And I'd be happy to answer any questions as it ties into mine and Joelle's presence today.
Thanks so much, Marcy. A couple other folks, again, love to hear from everybody, but I would, so this was an important conversation and a container as we're thinking about building a just and equitable future and a regenerative, healthy economy that is strong and includes workers with strong rights and strong voices. And I think in some of our work in the Alaska Climate Alliance and the Regenerative Economies Working Group, we've been thinking a lot about what our economy means here in Alaska. And I think, at its root, this word economy, eco, and it means management of home, right? That's what economy means at its root. And these policies and budgets that I hope we're going to talk about a little bit later are also a reflection of our values and our relationships. And so here in Alaska, when we think about our economy and what it means to have a well-managed home, and what I think about in terms of what makes me feel safe and secure and rich, I often think of food. I often think of my freezer and whether it's full. I live here in Homer, and I'm so grateful that there are places I can go fish or get fresh fish from fishermen who are catching it pretty close to where I live. So I was hoping we could hear from Melanie to share a little bit about some of the work that you're doing and thinking about in terms of our coastal communities, our fisheries, food, and those important pieces of our economy as well.
Hello, my name is Melanie Brown. My Yupik name is Taikupa. My great-grandmother gave me that name when I visited Bristol Bay for the first time as a baby. Because I had to travel all the way from Sitka. My dad was teaching at a BIA boarding school that he also attended. But when it comes to coastal communities and fishing, so I'm also an organizer for Salmon State in the winter. And in the summer, I commercial fish in Bristol Bay, where my mother is from, in the Naknek River District. I fished the site that my great-grandfather, Paul Chacon, staked out when he transitioned from being a sailboat fisherman during the sailboat era in Bristol Bay. But when you think about coastal communities, it's kind of you can't just think about them through the lens of commercial fishing, nor can you just think about them through the lens of subsistence or traditional and customary practices. It's tricky, and many people in coastal communities live blended existence, where they still live in relationship to the land and the sea, and it's hard to monetize what they gain for their existence. If they are accessing the food that they can get from the sea and from the intertidal or coastal zone, but so there are just so many different considerations that make it kind of confusing to really map things out clearly. But one thing I will say is that as fishermen, we're independent, so it makes it hard for us to bargain in ways that have already been referred to. So that's tricky. Fishermen have organized to bargain for their pricing in the past, but a lot of the processors, they do things to keep that from happening now, like such as not announcing the price per pound until the end of the season. But it's also a very complex thing to consider because our price is determined primarily by the strength of the dollar, because a lot of our fish is exported to other countries. When it comes to seafood workers, I've been hearing murmurs of unions organizing because so many seafood workers are migratory workers. There is a group called Justicia Pescando that a lot of seafood workers are starting to organize through, because there were so many heinous things that happened to them during the pandemic when it came to, when they were doing their work intake. But the thing that I'm most focused on when I think of coastal communities as a whole through a commercial fishing lens is or issues of bycatch. When you and I know it's hard to pin that to the pillars that we're discussing today, but there are things that if we want fish for the future, if we want coastal communities to continue to survive and thrive, there are some serious things that are going to need to be done when it comes to the paradigm that we're in right now. With like one thing that I would direct your thinking towards is likening commercial fishing operations, small commercial fishing, independently owned commercial fishing operations to, say, a small farm. And we all know what has happened to small independent farms in the United States. They've all been absorbed by mega farms, by agriculture that has had to be subsidized by the federal government. And now it seems like the only small farms that exist are really super artisanal farms. And if things keep going the way they are in Alaska, with the way that there are the massive trawl fleets that are, mining the ocean, basically, and catching so many fish that should be destined for the Yukon River, for all of the small communities on the Yukon River and the coastal communities to the north that don't, they're not able to participate in commercial fisheries, or many people in coastal communities, they don't necessarily participate in commercial fisheries, but as I referred to before, they're able to support themselves because of the way that they live in relation to the ocean and the land. And the trawl fleets are really hampering the ability for people to survive and thrive in coastal communities. And then another consideration is access when it comes to young people, the younger generation coming up and being able to buy in to the fishery. It's getting more and more challenging for young people to have access to either quota or to be able to purchase permits, and to be able to capitalize, by buying a vessel. And so these are serious challenges that I'm hoping that we will be able to adjust our systems around so that, more people can have access. And so coastal communities can continue to thrive, or regain access that they have lost. I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I feel like I've opened the door to a lot of things, maybe too many things, but I wanted to at least get people's minds working around, what I've introduced. I hope this is what you had in mind, Carly. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Melanie. I appreciate that so much. And I know this is a gigantic topic. I was joking at the beginning that we're going to have a very casual conversation about really huge things. We're talking about creating new jobs, keeping our communities and economy that are thriving and healthy and regenerative whole. We're talking about making sure that, our workers, all of us are workers, right? We have a voice, and that we have the ability to organize and protect our rights and our workplaces. And we're talking about, a shift in economy, perhaps. So I have one more person I would like to see if they would like to share a little bit as a small business owner, perhaps one of these next generation folks who are thinking of starting business. Skye, I will also be happy not to put you on the spot, but would love to hear if you could share a little bit about your story and what you're up to in a coastal community as part of a regenerative economy.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Skye. I live and work on EAC lands in so-called Cordova. And first want to say thanks to Melanie for bringing up a lot of really important issues, which I've heard from folks here, families that have fished for a long time, and just, those issues of access and the changes that are happening in the seas here are really serious. And I'm lucky enough to work under the guidance and leadership of an EAC elder named Unangan, who has started several nonprofit organizations. So one of them is called Native Conservancy. And first want to just shout out to Dune, because he has a pretty awesome vision in terms of how mariculture and specifically kelp farming can be a way for us to be in a more reciprocal relationship with the ocean. And he's thinking about all the right things. And of course, there are challenges, challenges in terms of access and policies that are in place. But I think that kelp is really exciting. So I support Native Conservancy as my day job. And I've also started now a small business with my partner. So this fall we'll be doing our first outplanting, and it's pretty close to Dunes kelp site too, in Simpson Bay in Prince William Sound. So we have a permit for a 22-acre kelp farm to grow ribbon and sugar kelp. And we're going to be starting much smaller than that, less than 2 acres, actually, just growing kelp on 8 grow out lines that are 400 feet long each. And I'm really excited about the potential with kelp, because it does serve as a habitat for a lot of these fish populations that are suffering, and an area for them to feed, and a nursery area for young fish. And it does also counter local ocean acidification by sequestering carbon and outputting a lot of oxygen. So it's an exciting thing, I think. Right now, it's like seaweed cultivation, and of course it's been big in some other countries for a long time, and Alaska, I think, is at this kind of potent moment for mariculture right now. And so I guess that's about all I got, but I'm happy if anybody wants to talk more about kelp farming offline. I'll drop my contact information in the chat too.
Thanks so much, Sky. It's great to hear about new small businesses and those that have an incredible opportunity to help sequester carbon, help support coastal communities. I'm really excited about that. And I'm going to do a little weaving here and bring us from kelp farming and new businesses and startup over to green energy and renewables. And Marcy, I know IBEW has been thinking a lot about renewable energy and potential jobs there and job training around renewable energy. And I'm wondering if you could share with us just a little bit about where you're headed, what your thoughts are moving forward in this sort of growing sector in Alaska. And then finally, any policies or anything that you would like to highlight that perhaps we could all learn about and engage on.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And you're absolutely right, Carly. I mean, a lot of the news and the politics right now is about renewables, and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers across the nation is all about that. One of the conversations that we've been involved in with the current administration in DC regarding coal plants, right? And one of the particular coal plants that the IBW represents is located in Healy. And how will that, the introduction of renewable, what does that impact to that community? What does that impact to those workers that live there, raise their families there? And then further, what is the impact of that? That coal plant in Healy feeds into Fairbanks. So what we would like to promote, or we do promote with our apprenticeship program, we don't, currently the apprenticeship program trains power linemen, trains electrical wiremen, electricians, and communication workers and tree trimmers. We can easily accommodate a curriculum that introduces the solar component, the other components to reduce that carbon emissions. And that, we already have the framework in place, as Joelle kind of alluded to earlier, with regards to how are we going to make that adjustment. When a coal plant closes, you don't just all of a sudden have a new set of skilled workers there. It has to be planned. It has to be, You have to consult with the cultures and the communities that it impacts, and that it feeds. The other new energy that we're working on is the electric vehicle. And while it seems like an anomaly for Alaska, I think, Sky's in Cordova. Cordova has at least one electric vehicle charging station. And when you drive through Cordova, the last thing you're going to think of is a Tesla, right? You've got the big trucks that you can launch your boat or bring your boat back. But that's the mindset we're heading towards. And that's another thing that we're looking to train in our apprenticeship schools with regards to electric vehicle charging stations. There's more and more of that happening, and it is happening even here in Alaska. Here at our Anchorage Hall, we'll have one installed this summer. And those are a couple of the key items that we're looking at. And solar is another one. Solar is big. It's happening at the residential area quite a bit right now, even here in Alaska. And we look forward to being a part of that as it grows forward into a commercial market.
Thanks so much for that. I'm just going to weave us a little bit more, and then would love I will definitely open it up if other folks have questions or thoughts. But again, right, this whole conversation and talking about transition and building up a workforce, as Marcy pointed out, looks different in each community. It absolutely is really variable in Alaska and all over the country, of course. And I'm just thinking of what you were saying, Melanie, about how access and challenges to purchasing equipment, boats, and even permits for young fishermen is a persistent challenge. I've heard this before. Are you aware of any creative solutions, or have you thought about any options to help us spur investment into young fishermen or help remove some of those barriers to access?
I know that, through the council process, there have been discussions about having a quota pool where people can buy really small amounts of quota to make it affordable, more affordable. But from what I've heard, it sounds like there's a lot of resistance with the, like the old stalwart people, who've been running the council process for a long time. It's a very sort of cloistered process. And, it's like, the old rich people that got their, they got their quota and they're hanging on to it. And because it's worth something now, it's really, and there doesn't seem to be enough focus on considering the next generation, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that if people are persistent enough and united enough, that that old thinking will change and fall away, and somehow, there will be more equity built into how fishing quotas and permits and so forth are handled. When it comes to loans, I know that there is a revolving loan fund, but it was kind of strange. Like, I'm in the process of buying a truck. I need to buy a truck so I can pull my skiff. I looked into using the revolving loan fund through the state of Alaska, and there is they offer really good rates, but I didn't end up pursuing it because it said if you can't get a loan through conventional means, that's when you can, use the revolving loan fund. So it's not as easy as I've heard, so I'll just have to go through like a conventional loan program. But I guess I'm sorry I don't have like a more firm answers, but I know that people are trying to make motions to break down old barriers. for sure. But it's slow moving.
Yeah, that's thank you, Melanie. That's a common theme for sure. Here in Homer, there's at the Kachemak Bay campus, there's, great programs to train you to be a deckhand and to be a part of a team on a boat, but not a lot that helps you perhaps get to owning your own boat. And I think, as Sky pointed out in the chat, some of these investments and loans are really challenging. And one thing we can maybe look forward to or advocate for through some of the Infrastructure Act or other legislation that would put investments directly in Alaskans' hand is what are the institutions that can help with that? I wonder about CDFIs, community development financial institutions, and other mechanisms that can sometimes make loans, with different indicators just than a standard return on investment. Well, I of course, have another couple of questions, but I want to make sure if there are other folks who have questions, I think you could unmute and ask them yourself, or if you want to drop them in the chat, we can do it that way as well. So I'll just see if anyone else has a question first. Or comments or thoughts on solutions, right? I think a lot of these conversations have been built to help get us to some shared solutions and perhaps collective voices.
So this is Abby, and hello, everybody. I just had a comment and a question. I really appreciate what you all shared. And one thing I was just curious about, I work in the education sector, and what I see is that there's not a very good feedback loop in terms of like what is actually needed and then what is actually happening within the education system. And I was just wondering, so Marcy had mentioned, the IBEW training programs and in relation to, potentially increasing jobs for renewable energies, but is there some sort of feedback loop mechanism to get information from the specific communities and community members about what they need? So for instance, I live in Denaakk'e Bay, which is on Prince of Wales Island. We're a very small community. A lot of people have kind of homesteady type of properties and could really benefit from being able to be more self-sustaining. But I don't know if that is a known need. Yeah, so I was just wondering if there's kind of, ways to get the feedback from the communities about what is needed that might drive the jobs that we're producing.
And this is Joelle. I'm sorry I fell off, and now I'm back on. Is this when you say sustainable, self-sustaining, are you talking about an adjustment to curriculum so that it's a focus?
Yeah, that's a component of it. I've actually talked to somebody who's worked have been kind of formative in the Georgia state, kind of how they've flipped some of their education systems to actually be driven by the business community. Like what the community needs then drives the educational programs that are available at the even in the high school.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the only thing I'm going to say about that I'm aware of is that the feedback loop is to the school board itself. And in that school board could be living someplace really different than where you live. Could be a little disconnected, like from the actual community you're talking about. But feedback loops are an important part. In business, could be relatively instant. In government, it's always a little more difficult, right? To do the feedback loop. But if you take your question, you bring it up 10,000 feet. The next question is, how do we get administrators of all kinds
to Melanie's point, to everybody's point, how do you get administrators of all kinds at all levels of government and in, elected and in government service to look a little further down the road about where we're headed? Always a tough ask in the political game, because they may or may not be there to live to do it. But you're right, and I'm sorry, I can only see 3 people as a screen. I missed the name of the person who was talking from Prince of Wales. But you're right. The model of coming out of the community to the school board, that transcends the lifetime of any elected official. So it's what we've been talking about all along. I mean, this is about organizing, right? And how to and picking what you think your community is ready to organize around, because there's a million things, as we've talked about on this phone today. There's a million ways to make a more just economy. The question is, which thread, when you pull on it, invokes your passion and is connected to what your community is really feeling and wanting. And then how can we all work together to help build that? And also, how do they stack in on top of each other, right? Because, I mean, Marcy and I will tell you, we spend many, many hours of our day involved in organizing. That's what we do, and sometimes you're successful beyond your wildest dreams and you're actually moving that ball down the road. But that's why conversations like this are so good, because you've identified things, and so has Melanie. These are problems you have now that you have you have a horizon to work on them. And I always like those types of problems rather than you're immediately, it's like, if we don't fix this tomorrow, our world, it's the worst thing ever. Because I like these big thought problems of how do you solve big systemic problems. The problem is, of course, we're not solving one problem, we're solving a million problems that solve one problem. So, and each of us has got a hold of one little piece of the rope, right? One little piece of the thread. But I think your feedback loop in the current mode, I'm saying all systems can change, right? But the current system, the feedback loop is your community creates a sense of consensus, and they go to the school district and they ask them for what they want to be different.
Collective voice, as you said earlier, Joelle, and thanks for big system thinking. That was great. Any other comments and thoughts? This can definitely, again, be a conversation.
Well, I guess I will weigh in. Marilyn Russell here, and I'm sorry I'm so late. I really have no idea what you're even addressing the big picture of. But one thing on the Alaska Black Caucus Education Committee that we're trying to do is have the number of non-white teachers reflect the number of the same percentages of the non-white students. And there is one thing about hiring, is that they're not allowed to ask, what is your race? And I talked to a friend of mine who was a professor over at the University of Fairbanks, and he agreed that in there they were not allowed to ask that background. So I'm just reminded of that kind of thing when I see an advertisement that says something like kids can't become what they don't see, or something like that. So anyway, I don't know if that's something that you all are addressing, but that's a major thing for me as a retired elementary school teacher.
Well, I don't want to monopolize. Problem that solved it and created another problem, right? So society created that system that said you can't ask, designing to solve for one problem. Does this still serve our purpose? If our stated goal, those are system designs, right? That was a choice. That was a progressive, thoughtful idea about how to make the system more fair. Does it still make it more fair? Or are we talking about a different kind of fairness now? So it's all to the point that we've been making today. It's like, these are, you have to.
Joelle, you're breaking up a little on your phone, I think.
We're embroiled in the PRO Act.
Yep, I think Joelle is breaking up.
We have to fix the system. Otherwise, I have terrible internet, I guess.
I know, that's okay. I think we caught a little bit about what you were saying, and I do have, we're coming up close to an hour. And I was really struck at the beginning of this conversation, and what I believe in also, that just we are stronger when we use a collective voice, right? We are stronger, we can make more change, and we are in one of those moments right now. There's a lot of moving pieces in federal legislation. There's an opportunity for change in so many ways. And as Melanie pointed out, one very big concern for a lot of our family fishermen and our communities that rely on fish is bycatch. And I'm just thinking, if each of you had one thing that you could share with us that would help us understand how we can add voices to the work that you're doing. I'm curious about Senator Murkowski and the PRO Act. I'm curious about Melanie, and are there ways for people who are not in unions to advocate for the PRO Act? And Melanie, are there ways for people who are not in the commercial fishing industry to advocate for reduced bycatch? What can we do cross-sector wise to help solve some of these problems and add collective voice?
I'll go ahead and go since you didn't say who you wanted to go first. So when it comes to the North Pacific Fisheries Council process, that is the governing body, or the, I don't know if governing is the right word. That's the body that determines, what will be fished and where. Unfortunately, they operate under maximum sustained yield. When you're talking about fisheries that are more shore-based or terminal fisheries, the state of Alaska operates under sustained yield, which is much more tied to sustainability than maximum sustained yield, like the council does. And they do have a way for people to comment, but it's a very opaque process. You have to know the intricacies of the process. And it seems as if what they're doing right now, because they're trying to hang on to, the old ways of doing things, is they're purposefully doing things to interfere with public participation, which was very evident in the last council meeting that happened. But I think that is something that is really going to spur people's will to participate even more. And I think that is a way that people can, provide input is through that process. And I think there are going to be a lot more voices getting the word out to the public because the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council has been behaving in such terrible ways. So I just keep your eyes open. It's been in the news quite a bit. If you just Google North Pacific Fisheries Management Council and public comment, you're going to be finding some news hits that are pretty recent. I wish I had a better answer. I wish there were more ways that that all of us could participate in stopping such heinous bycatch of Chinook salmon, of halibut, and forage fish that are so important to all the tiers of, of the food web. but yeah, just keep your eyes and ears open. And if you hear of ways to participate and testify, in testifying, by all means, please do.
I'll chime in on the PRO Act if it's appropriate, and I want to be mindful of our time. At this point, I'll just come right out and ask each and every one of you to write to Senator Murkowski and ask for her support for the PRO Act. So PRO is protect the right to organize. It is a substantial piece of legislation, labor law, that would allow workers more flexibility, more freedom. Right now, the power of the organizing drive really is skewed to an employer. A real life scenario where 3 years in an argument and a fight with a group of 14 employees here in Alaska that wanted to organize, and the company has fought them every step of the way, used every legal means. So this PRO Act, if it passes, would eliminate 98% of that. And I'll let Joelle chime in as well.
I just dropped into the chat a document from the Economic Policy Institute, which kind of goes in the side by side of how the law works now and what the PRO Act would change. Marcy's right. There's been a systematic attempt to diminish the ability to have a collective voice, and that it happens in a myriad little tiny ways where they just tilt the scale to make it almost impossible for workers to band together to elect to have a union in their workplace. They've done it sneakily over decades, and it's going to take us a while to get it all back on the right track. But this is where we are right now. This is past the House. Don Young has supported it. It's in the Senate. We have 46 or 47 Democrats. We're working on 3 more. Lisa Murkowski is the #1 target for the crossover. She could be the person who changes the deck forever for working people. And we are getting a lot of attention because everybody else thinks she could be too. So any help you could give us would be great. The collective voice, power concedes nothing willingly. It's just a fact of life. And this is the only way you change it. You stand together, you hold hands, and you go forward, and you have one voice. It's the only way. And we're just going to make it more possible for more workers to do that. And then we'll build on this for more industries that don't fit the box we're currently in. We got to build a bigger box. But this is the predicate. If we don't have this, it doesn't matter how big the box is, right?
That was a beautiful way to end this conversation, Joelle. Thank you so much. I hope for a few moments this felt like a fireside chat for you all, where we were sharing and learning together. And I hope you'll all continue to share and learn with each other and with AFL-CIO, with IBEW, with Salmon State, and Melanie with Sky and her kelp farm, which she'll drop the name in the chat. I think it's a really great name. I forget what it is. And with the Just Transition Collective. Keep plugging in and joining in, and we'll hopefully all be able to share how we can use our collective voices in this moment in time to help solve these crises. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much to the guest speakers and folks who chimed in, and all of you for watching and being here tonight. And go eat some good food.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.